how does it all look? Is my hair good? It's all good.
Because I'm from the States, you don't grow up with the same understanding of the royal family.
Well, that's just not true.
I didn't know much about him.
Well, that's just not true. I'm not sure exactly what the outcome will be, but definitely not good.
Why is Meghan Markle, one of the most outspoken public figures of our time, completely silent about the single most explosive scandal the royal family has ever faced?
But it's very disturbing what Ghislaine says about Meghan, that Meghan was part of that ring. Why else would Virginia Roberts call her as a witness? Why else?
For years, she's used her voice to challenge injustice, sexism, bullying, and the abuse of power. She has built her brand on standing up for women who aren't able to defend themselves.
There's this new article that came out that reads Meghan Markle's CV included adult entertainment and entertaining guests for Jeffrey Epstein.
And yet, when the world turned its attention to the dark shadow surrounding Prince Andrew and the Jeffrey Epstein case, Meghan said nothing, not a word, not a post, not a hint, not even the slightest acknowledgement. It felt intentional, calculated, almost chilling, because it wasn't just silence. It was silence in a moment when the world expected her to speak.
Do I have any doubt that Meghan Markle was a call girl? Of course not. I don't have any doubts whatsoever. I believe that she's being protected not because of who she is, but because of the connections of the people that put her there.
Some people thought she stayed quiet out of respect for the monarch. Others assumed she didn't want to interfere. But that doesn't align with Meghan's track record. She didn't hesitate to speak out against royal racism. She didn't hesitate to expose palace cruelty. She didn't hesitate to call out the British media. So why, when the scandal that shook the royal establishment reached its peak, did she choose to disappear from the conversation completely? The answer isn't simple, and it's not accidental.
Meghan Markle being part of this whole ordeal, I believe she's a nobody, but she's a nobody who knows who put her there. And this is why things are tricky right now for everybody. And this is why those documents were redacted.
Meghan's silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And the deeper you dig, the more obvious it becomes that her silence protects far more than her own image. Because Meghan's voice has power, and power, when used at the wrong moment, can burn down everything in its path. But what happens when silence becomes even more dangerous than speaking out? Stay with me. What comes next changes everything.
People like Meghan Markle or Jeffrey Epstein don't just suddenly pop out of nowhere. And if they do, it's because they're planted there. We know that Meghan Markle, sure, she went after Harry, but she had help getting there.
From the very beginning of her public life, Meghan positioned herself as someone who refuses to look away from uncomfortable truths. Long before she ever met Prince Harry, she spoke publicly about gender inequality, abuse of power, and the pressure placed on women to stay quiet when it benefits the powerful. Her entire identity in the public eye was built on breaking silence. That's why, when the scandal involving Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein erupted into global headlines, observers assumed Meghan would be the first royal figure to acknowledge the situation. She had the platform, the voice, and the history of calling out wrongdoing. Critics, supporters, journalists, everyone held their breath, waiting for her response. But instead of speaking, she disappeared from the conversation entirely. No commentary in interviews, no mention in podcasts, not a single reference in any public appearance. It wasn't just absence, it felt like a deliberate disappearance. What unsettled people most was that Meghan wasn't shy about addressing other controversial topics during the exact same period. She condemned racism inside the monarchy. She highlighted the emotional damage she endured behind palace walls. She called out what she described as a coordinated campaign by the British press to destroy her. But while she challenged the monarchy and the media, she refused to acknowledge the most explosive royal crisis unfolding in real time.
Ghislaine Maxwell, according to the article, says that she did know Meghan Markle. Let's not forget that Virginia Roberts called her as a witness because she had information about it.
Her supporters scrambled for explanations, but none of them fit. This wasn't fear, it wasn't distraction, it wasn't oversight. It was absolute intentional non-engagement. The public began to wonder if there was a reason her voice fell silent only on that one subject, if there was pressure, risk, or some shadow of consequence attached to speaking. And once that question surfaced, it became impossible to ignore. But the real story begins when we ask not why she stayed silent, but who needed her to, because the next layer makes everything far more unsettling. Inside the royal institution, silence isn't just preferred, it's enforced. Every member of the family follows a strict communications blueprint, where words are measured, interviews are scripted, and timing is everything. When the Epstein scandal surged into the headlines, the palace's defensive machinery shifted into high alert. Their first priority wasn't transparency, it was containment. Senior advisors crafted a crisis strategy built around one principle: no royal should comment directly or indirectly on anything related to Epstein. That blanket rule applied to everyone, including Meghan and Harry, even though they weren't directly connected to the matter. The palace didn't want another voice giving oxygen to the scandal, and Meghan was viewed as the biggest risk. Her emotional honesty in interviews, her ability to command media attention, and her willingness to challenge powerful figures made her dangerous in a situation the monarchy desperately wanted buried under silence.
But going back to Meghan Markle, apparently she went by the name Flower. That was her character name because for some reason she wants to portray herself as this demure person. This woman who has, I want to put it kindly and nicely, has been around the block so many times. There's already like a trail.
Behind closed doors, instructions were clear. Avoid the topic, decline questions, shut down interviewers who attempted to bring it up, and never acknowledge the situation publicly in any format. Meghan wasn't told to stay quiet. She was told to stay invisible on that subject. And whether she agreed with the approach or resented it, the choice wasn't hers to make, as long as she remained a working royal. Her silence wasn't born from hesitation. It was a requirement of the institution she had become part of. But here's the twist. When Meghan and Harry walked away from royal duties, that obligation should have ended, yet the silence continued, which raises the question, if the palace no longer controls Meghan's voice, why didn't her voice return? The answer leads us straight into Hollywood, and the strategy that changed everything. When Meghan and Harry stepped out of the palace and into the world of global media, many assumed the couple would finally speak without restriction. They launched a foundation, signed multi-million-dollar streaming deals, and sat down for interviews designed to reclaim their narrative. Meghan was finally in an environment where nobody could censor her. And yet, even with total freedom, the silence on the Epstein topic didn't break. This wasn't royal control anymore. This was calculated brand strategy. Meghan's team understood something critical. Discussing Epstein in any capacity would permanently attach her public identity to one of the darkest scandals in modern history. Her Hollywood reinvention relied on her roles as advocate, entrepreneur, and cultural icon, not as a commentator on a disaster tied to the institution she left behind.
Press is trying to pave the way back for Meghan Markle, almost like Fergie, to come back. But Ghislaine revelations put Meghan in a very, very bad light. Because if it is all true, Meghan Markle is way worse than we thought.
Every major interview was carefully mapped to support that transformation. The Oprah special focused on family tension, emotional trauma, racism, and motherhood. The Spotify content centered on women's empowerment and personal growth. Netflix explored their love story and their conflict with the monarchy. Not one interviewer was allowed to touch the Epstein subject, not because Meghan was scared, but because the topic had the power to derail everything she was building. The silence was no longer a royal order. It was a shield for her future. But Hollywood's media discipline wasn't flawless. At one point, a streaming executive raised a question that blindsided everyone involved, and it exposed just how fragile the strategy really was. And what happened next sent shockwaves through every level of the Sussex brand. The moment Prince Andrew became the central figure in the Epstein scandal, everything inside the royal ecosystem shifted. The monarchy wasn't just battling a public relations disaster, it was staring down the possibility of irreversible reputational collapse. For decades, the royal family survived controversies by controlling the narrative, but the Epstein case was different. It wasn't tabloid drama, it wasn't personal scandal, it was a global criminal investigation involving power, corruption, and unthinkable exploitation. Any comment from someone inside or formally connected to the royal family had the potential to reignite media frenzy and drag the monarchy back into the spotlight, especially if that person had the world's attention and zero hesitation about expressing hard truths. And no one fit that description better than Meghan Markle.
They are protecting who put Meghan there, who is behind Meghan's sudden rise or being able to infiltrate the royal family so quickly, to infiltrate that circle of people, because it's really hard to break into the royal family. You have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And yes, I do know that she was aware of people and she had some friends, but how did she get there? And it all leads back to Soho House and Ron Burkle.
From the palace's perspective, Meghan speaking about Epstein, even indirectly, would be catastrophic. Even implying that she found the silence disturbing would paint the family as complicit. Even expressing empathy for victims could reopen the case through the lens of royal accountability. Meghan didn't need to accuse anyone for headlines to explode. Her opinion alone could trigger global fallout. So the unspoken reality took hold. Her silence wasn't protecting Prince Andrew, it was protecting the monarchy's survival. And ironically, even after stepping away from royal duties, Meghan still shared that burden. Breaking her silence would not only put the palace in danger, it would thrust her into the center of a scandal she had no part in. Yet there came a moment moment when she almost spoke anyway, and that moment lit a fuse nobody expected. The turning point came when a major American network pitched a primetime documentary exploring the modern monarchy and its fractures. It wasn't framed around Epstein, at least not on the surface. The producers wanted Meghan to speak about the pressures of palace life, the internal politics, and the toll of being a woman in an institution built on secrecy. On paper, it sounded like a safe opportunity. Meghan could control her narrative, advocate for women, and further shape her public identity. Early discussions began. Draft talking points circled. Her team explored what themes she could address without reliving the Oprah interview. And then, during an internal planning call, a single question flipped the entire project upside down. If the documentary covers royal scandals broadly, a producer asked, would Meghan be willing to comment on the Andrew situation? Nobody expected that question, and nobody had an answer ready. The topic couldn't be ignored. The network wanted the documentary to have cultural impact, and Andrew's name was impossible to leave out. If Meghan refused to address it, she risked appearing evasive. If she commented, she risked being permanently attached to the scandal. There was no safe route. Her team recognized immediately that the documentary wasn't an opportunity. It was a trap disguised as one. Within days, all negotiations ended, and the project was shut down from Meghan's side before a contract was ever finalized.
Everything at the heart of all of this is always Fergie, guys. Fergie is always at the heart of all of this. This woman is a terrible thing, and she's known Meghan Markle for quite some time. And isn't it incredible? Because Jeffrey Epstein was in 2000 invited also to the biggest bash of the decades that they had. That biggest bash included really close people with the royal family, and there's even said that the Queen unknowingly danced with Jeffrey Epstein.
What the public never saw was the ripple effect that decision caused, because news of the near interview reached the palace. And when it did, the tension inside the royal family reached a level Meghan never anticipated. When word reached the palace that Meghan had been approached for a documentary that might include conversation around Andrew, panic spread fast. Even though she ultimately rejected the offer, the fact that she was even in the same orbit as producers interested in royal scandals triggered a level of alarm that hadn't surfaced since the Oprah interview. And at the center of that anxiety was Prince William. For years, he'd been haunted by the fallout of Andrew's actions, not because of personal loyalty, but because he knew the scandal threatened the future of the monarchy he would one day inherit. William viewed Meghan as unpredictable, outspoken, and dangerously media savvy. The thought of her speaking freely about royal accountability, even without mentioning Andrew by name, terrified him. All it would take was one sentence implying that silence was shameful, and the family's wall of denial would collapse overnight. Harry, meanwhile, was trapped in an emotional tug-of-war. He understood Meghan's need to control her voice, but he also grasped the pressure William carried. The brothers weren't simply divided by personality, they were divided by responsibility. William believed silence was necessary to protect the institution. Harry believed honesty was necessary to protect the person he loved. Meghan never intended to threaten the monarch, yet her words could destroy it far more effectively than any journalist ever could. That realization hit all three of them in different ways. And so, for the first time, Meghan wasn't just choosing for herself, she was choosing between worlds: the life she was building in America and the family she left behind. What she decided next explains everything about her silence and why it will almost certainly never break. So after everything, the palace pressure, the Hollywood branding, the Andrew fallout, the fragile bond between two brothers, and the weight of a monarchy fighting for survival, Meghan's silence makes sense in a way no headline ever captured. She isn't quiet because she doesn't care. She isn't quiet because she's afraid. She's quiet because she understands that one sentence spoken at the wrong moment could ignite a storm that destroys everyone involved, including people she still cares about, no matter how complicated those relationships have become. And when silence becomes the safest choice for everyone, breaking it stops being an act of courage and becomes an act of irreversible consequence. Whether Meghan ever speaks about this topic publicly is something only time will reveal. But one thing is certain, if she ever does, the world won't just listen, it will stop. If you've watched until the end, you clearly don't just follow royal drama. You understand the patterns, the secrets, and the invisible power plays happening behind the scenes. So if you want to go even deeper into the hidden history behind Meghan Markle's rise inside elite circles, don't miss our previous video. It covers the shocking story of Meghan's Soho House days, and trust me, once you watch it, so many pieces of this puzzle will suddenly click. Click and binge watch it now. And don't forget to subscribe to Star Spotlight, where the truth always finds the light, no matter how hard the world tries to bury it.